Hey, everybody. I'm Adrienne. I'm with Reston Library, and thank you for joining us for the first session of the memoir writing workshop with Shabnam Curtis. She's the author of My Persian Paradox, Memories of an Iranian Girl. Do you want me to go ahead and pull up the slides right now?
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now let me share my screen.
Well, hi, everyone. While Adrienne is pulling the slides up, I really appreciate you being here. I'm excited to share my experience with you. I'm Shabnam Curtis. I did write my memoir and published it in 2019. My Persian Paradox, and it took a few years, but it was a true healing process, or it was the beginning of the healing process, definitely, and a very big step for it. I'm glad you are here. I'm glad that you also have in your mind that your stories matter, because everybody's story matters. And let's just share what I've learned through this process, and I hope it helps you and motivates you to share your story. How about that? All right. Yeah, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay. Wait.
So this is, like Adrienne mentioned, this is a session 1 of 4 session memoir writing. In this session, we go over basically the main structure of writing a memoir, and how it's very similar to also, or how it borrows a lot of literary tools from novel or fiction writing. And then next 3 weeks, we are going to focus on each one of those, or a few of them, of those tools that we can use to kind of like bring our story to life. Today, we are going to see why the storytelling is important. And we also hear memoir, and we also hear autobiography. What is the difference between the two kinds of writing? What are the different types of memoirs, and what is the theme that we want to choose, and how to begin to write? We might have a lot of different stories all over our lives, or someone who we are writing about it, but we don't know where to start. So that's I'm going to share how it worked for me. And then, like I mentioned, we are going to have a quick review on literary tools that we can use for storytelling purposes. And I'm, as a certified life coach, it's very important for me to make sure that when you are writing your memoir, you also have the emotional support for yourself, or asking it from other people. Because many of us, in fact, there is no one in this world that doesn't have a challenge that had to deal with in her or his life, right? We all have had challenges, and some of them have been traumatizing, some of them have been really stressing. So emotional support is important, because in one way or another, even beautiful memories can come up as kind of like powerful, show themselves, manifest themselves as powerful emotions while we're writing it, while we are going to dig down in it. So we will talk about emotional support. And then I have a suggestion if you like to start based on what we talked today. I hope that this is a good help, and let's jump in. Thank you. Oh, okay. I forgot that you have, I have a little bit of kind of like a structure on next 3 weeks. We are going to talk about the structural edits and the voice, the writer's voice next week. We will talk more about emotional support. On the 3rd week, we are going to focus on character development. Your memoir, your story has you as a character and many others around you who have played roles in your life. And then on the last week, we are going to work on the scene writing, and of course, talking about emotional support. So these are what will come up we will go more to details for it. Thank you. So why is the story so important? I would like to actually hear if someone likes to share. If you want to like write it in the chat, or if you want to come on and share it with us that why story is very important. Anybody likes to share?
Can I just talk? It seems
Please.
to me your story is what carries the reader along. It's important for you to frame it so it's interesting, but it's equally important for the reader to be able to see where you started and where you end up, and the story takes you on that arc. That's what I think.
Exactly. Yeah. That's beautiful. It's not just about the writer, it's also about the reader, right? We take the reader with us to those unknown places that the readers haven't been. Like when we read stories, right? Some of them are the stories that we would never be experienced, but we can experience it through the writer's voice and what the writer shares with us. Anybody else likes to talk and share? I want to, I don't know if you can see this book. It's called The World is Made of Stories. It's a very small book. It's fascinating. It's amazing. It's about stories and how stories can shape our lives and how our lives can shape stories. It's I really highly recommend it. A very small little book, but offers a lot. But also, so when we tell our stories, it's not kind of like we don't want to tell a story of our life to gather in like pity from other people. We want to share the story because we want them to be aware of it. We want them to kind of like, not only I don't feel alone, other people like the reader also aren't feeling alone. Those universal human challenges that we all share. And like I mentioned and Terry mentioned, you carry the reader with you. We go to the places that we haven't gone before or we won't go, but through the stories we can experience that. And overall, we are going to, we listen to stories, we read stories, we tell stories to find meaning in our life. You know, for everything, from like the moment that you wake up in the morning to the moment that you go to bed at night, you want to find a meaning in your day and you create a narrative for everything that happens. But here in a memoir writing form, we want to kind of like go back to see what happened and how we can expand our view, our point of view to it, to make sure that it's not just me thinking about myself. I bring other people's other roles and other impacts of the society and culture in it. Thank you. If we can go to the next slide. Oh yeah, so the difference between memoir and autobiography, we hear both a lot. I'm sure you've heard it. And basically autobiography is most of the time is for celebrities, big political people. And it comes from like, it starts from the moment that they are born to the end, or at least as long as they are alive and they are writing it. It's kind of like full of facts. The portion of storytelling in it is a little bit less. So that's why that autobiography is kind of like, it reads a little bit more, like a little bit more dry, and it's all facts. But a memoir can be about one piece of your life, one piece of pie of the whole life that you've lived so far. And on that one piece of your life, it can be only one theme of that. Because, you know, we have layers and layers in every piece of our life. But it's not only that you bring the facts, you also bring emotions in it, your lessons learned. You do some analysis, and you know, to some extent, as a reflection, you want to share it with your reader. And like I said, a lot of storytelling tools from the world of fiction and novel, we take that, we borrow those tools to kind of like find how we can tell our stories. Next slide, please. Different types of memoirs. So we have so many different, you know, like I'm sure when I say that, when I go through this list, all different types of memoirs would come to your head. You know, like celebrities. The most recent ones, of course, are the Obamas, or actually those are not the most recent ones. There are more than that. Like there are so many Hollywood celebrities that they are now writing their memoirs. They're confessional, political, you know. Actually, if we want to talk about President Obama, political could be like one layer of his memoir, or one of the major themes, actually. Transformational is kind of like when you have done a practice or something in your life that it was transformational. The example that comes to my mind is Wild by Cheryl Strait. That's like a very transformational. Or even Eat, Pray, Love, you know, that's transformational. However, both of them, especially Eat, Pray, Love by Liz Gilbert, falls under the category of travel. My own memoir is coming of age. A lot of memoirs are coming of age, explains about our developmental years through those years, through the adulthood. Or it can be finding one's identity, and it can be like a very personal memoir. Depends on what you want to write. You want to kind of like find a major theme, a couple of major themes for your memoir. And there is a little bit more examples here that you will get. Adrian is always kind to us and sends all the slides, and you will get to read it more. Confession, yeah. I think it was about conventional memoir. I'm looking at my computer. Hold on. Chat. Confessional memoirs. Yes. It's if we could go back to the last slide, please. It's basically when someone did something that at the time even kind of like had punishment for it, or didn't. But then after years, there is a lesson learned about it that want to bring it out. I think there was a couple of memoirs, I don't remember the titles, but it was about a person who went to Afghanistan and started building schools. But at the same time, there was a lot of different things that he was doing, and it was morally not right. Many years after, he actually wrote the memoir and shared it with everybody. So it's a very brave thing to do. And I'm sure he was sure that legally it doesn't have consequences for him, or he had taken care of everything. But it's kind of like, yeah, I did make a mistake in my life, and these are the lessons learned, and I'm a different person. In a way, it's a transformational too. I hope I answered your question. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So yeah, different types of memoirs, right? And we want to know what the theme of our memoir is. Like I said, usually there are a couple major themes. And of course, life is complicated. Every event in our life has a lot of different layers. So it has sub themes, but we want to make sure that we focus on the major themes. We want to see what exactly happened, and what it meant to us, what happened and what we want to talk about it. What was it? What was my lesson learned? And then through that, it could be, was it like, a Rosa Parks type of a memoir, a social justice, or it was like me following a dream and I want to write about it. And, like, I had this dream. I started following this dream. Did I get to it? When I got to it, what happened? Or did I not get to it and what happened? Or in general, overcoming a difficult situation. So many difficult situations in our lives. We are all dealing with it. And it's important that we share our stories. It can be going through cancer, surviving cancer, or another type of really monster illness. It can be, what was the memoir that was When the Breath Becomes Air? It's actually about a terminal cancer that this doctor writes about. And I think at the end, his wife finishes it, but it's very touching. It's very beautiful. Things that we have to cope in our lives that we cannot change them. How do we do that? If any of us has a kid with disability, how do we want to, how did we deal with it? And how do we want to share it with other people and show the resilience that we built and the strength that we kind of like as a teamwork with that kid we built together. Is it about forgiving someone? Is it about mine is living under oppression, living under dictatorship? Or is it kind of like about a special travel that opened your eyes towards a very different culture? So it can be all so many different themes, but we have to make sure that we find the major theme and we focus on it so it doesn't go to a lot of different branches. Thank you. And how to begin? That's like so many people ask that question, and it is the most difficult part, I think. What helped me was I made a list of all the major milestones in my life. Now, you may have at a specific part of your life or a specific relationship in your life that you have in mind and you want to write about it. But if you don't know, and if there are so many different events and you haven't figured out what to select, you can make that list of all the major milestones. Usually there is at least one per year or one per couple of years, or sometimes one per 5 years. But go through major milestones that kind of like made a shift in your life. Now, the simple ones are marriage, graduation, having kids, but there is more than that. Even sometimes changing a career, even going for the same job, going from one company to another company can be really like a breakthrough. So there are so many major milestones in our life. And then when we put them together, look at it, just kind of like observe it, even for a couple of days, or take your time as much as you want. And then see the cause and effect, what happened and then what happened. How would it be if this wouldn't happen? Would the next one happen? Would the two from that happen? So look at the cause and effects. And sometimes there are, like even skipping one or two, you see that one impacted the other one. It's like a chain, a ripple effect that you can observe. And pick those, select those, and see if you can expand them a little bit. Like each major milestone can have outlines underneath that. Like, okay, what was it? But what was the 4 major things happened during that time for me, and see more about the cause and effect. And then it brings you a lot of awareness of what you want to write and what part of your life is now coming to your from subconscious to conscious to become a story to share. And at this moment, don't, you can just write your feelings. You can, when you have the outline, start writing it. Start kind of like writing what comes to your mind. Don't worry about like, oh, it's not literary, it's not, I have to edit it. No, none of that. It's kind of like you're just dumping all your thoughts and emotions, even like a journal on the page. And then later, this is kind of like to explore what I want to do. And then later you can use that material and edit it. Thank you. And that's when we have kind of like that draft, when we know what we are going to write, when we have actually like a draft of a narrative for our story, we know the scopes that can always change. I personally started my memoir when I was 18. And then after I wrote everything, I had an editor who I talked to, and she was like, what about this? What about that? What about this? So I decided to go back and start from 7 years old because of the revolution that happened in Iran and the impact of the revolution. And it quite changed the theme of my memoir. So it will change, but don't worry about it. Just start, that's like the start point, and it evolves. It emerges by itself. So the very first literary tool that we can use in order to bring our story to life is the narrative. To see what is, what it was, what happened, and what was the climax, and what was the resolution. And then we want to make sure that we capture all the stakes in our memoir. We want to make sure that we have a point of view that we will talk about, but that's consistent in our storytelling. Who are our characters, including the protagonist, and how we can develop those characters? What are the scenes? What are the dialogues? Flashbacks, backstory, and eventually, like, what are the reflections, lessons learned that I had, and a conclusion at the end. So let's dive in. Let's just go see what's more in each one of them. The narrative or the story arc, you usually hear it interchangeably. That's basically when you know that what's the sequence of your story. If you have those milestones and outlines, you know the original sequence, the chronological sequence of your story. So where I was, and then what happened, what was it that brought the change in me, and what was the climax of that path, and what was, what happened after that? How did I calm down, or how did I settle down, and what was coming out of it? So there are different structures that usually you can find as a narrative or a story arc. There is like what you see in the picture. It's like a three act narrative or a story arc. There are 5 acts that like has more climax. And you may have heard of the hero's journey. Hero's journey normally has like 12 steps of where the protagonist was, and then what happened, and how the protagonist responded to the calling that came in, and then what did the protagonist do with it, and how the protagonist came back to the normal life, and what was the impact of it. Now, there is one major criticizing on it now. A lot of us, many of us writing a memoir, our stories are not necessarily a Western story. Although hero's journey is very human journey, and it does fit in so many human stories. However, there are other myths that you can find a different structure for the journey. So if you are writing about a different culture, I highly recommend going through some of the folklores or myths and tales of your culture to see like how your story can fit in that structure, as far as the explosion, the rising action, the climax, and the falling action. How does that work for you? And we can go to the next slide. So we talked about the point of view. If we could go back to the previous one, thank you. Point of view is yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. So next one is stakes. Thank you. Well, stakes. Everybody. I mean, we wake up in the morning and we have challenges to deal with, right? I would like if someone likes to share what could be an example of a stake in a story, even if it's the story of your today's life. Can you bring examples? Can you either type it or come online and talk about it? What are the stakes that come to your mind? Don't be shy.
Can I just go ahead and talk?
Please, yes.
I guess in my case, it is about the death of my mother. So the conflicts and dealing, the decisions that had to be made and how it affected the family during, before, during, and after.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the loss and all the emotional confusion around it, all the decisions, right? Those are all the challenges that you had to deal with. Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's definitely, those type of stakes are the major stakes that we want to kind of like open it, unfold it. And we will see how many smaller stake is in the belly of each big stake that we had to deal with. And that's when you talk about your stakes, when you write about the challenges that you had to deal with, that's hopefully when you see your inner power, where you see all the values that you've added. And that's the major purpose of writing a memoir. It's sharing your story with other people, but as from a writer's standpoint, it's basically what did I learn? Who am I now? And there was a post today in Instagram that like, don't make a positive shape of trauma by saying, what do we say? Like, things that didn't kill me made me stronger. And my daughter and I were talking about it. Well, but it's unavoidable. Every morning we open our eyes and there are stakes, just ready for us in every step that we take. We have to make decisions. We have to deal with things that we don't like to do. We have to deal with things that we cannot change. We have to be strategic about things. And when you start writing about it, you see that like how far you've come. And it's not that, oh, it didn't kill me, it made me stronger. It's not saying that, oh, yay trauma, oh, yay stress. No, it's saying that it's there. How did I deal with it? It made me a more resilient person. So now I'm stronger and I don't allow more traumas to come and traumatize me, because I am a stronger person. I am a more mature person. And I can guarantee every one of you will see that when you start writing your memoir and thinking about your stakes. The point of view is another literary tool that we usually use. Most of the memoirists like to use I, as the first person standpoint, and you are telling your story about yourself. Usually, I've had people who wrote it about their mothers, their grandparents, but it still could be from I, because they've been involved, unless like if it was before they got involved and then after they were born. So that can be a little bit like mix and match, but usually you want to have one point of view. Now, I also have people who write it first in third person, that like, even though it's about me, but instead of say I was born in Iran, I say Shabnam was born in Iran. She was born in the family of. This way, you get to see your own self from a different standpoint. That makes it a little easier. That's a little less intimate. And then people do it and keep it. They like it. Like I have a friend, her stories have published and it's all in third person. And she's still writing in third person after years. But some people write it in third person and then change it to first person, because it kind of like eases it up to kind of get to know yourself, kind of like integrate all different parts of yourself, especially the parts that we don't like. It helps a little bit. So that's up to you. It's a little bit more work, but it does really help. Thank you. Characters, we have, the main character, the protagonist, using all these literary terms, right, in a storytelling structure. So the main character, the protagonist, and then there are other characters. You are writing about a travel that you've done, and there are so many people that have played different roles in your travel. Or it's about family, parents or siblings or kids or spouse, partners. So we have all these different characters, and we want to be fair to ourselves and to other characters. So the character development is very important. We want to make sure that our characters are not one-dimensional. A person, the most selfish person in the world, still has a heart, but his or her heart is just buried under a lot of maybe insecurity or grief. So the most important thing to write and develop a character, including yourself, is developing compassion. When you develop compassion, even from a person who really hurt you, you don't have to write rosy things about that person, but you can say that that person, in some cases that you observed, tried to be human, tried to be moral, but couldn't. And why? Or he was actually, my own father has so many different aspects to his character, maybe mainly disturbing, but he also had a big heart for helping people, or making sure that if I woke up as a child in the middle of the night, he was the one who would come to my bed. So every character, and he was also alcoholic, he was also violent. Every character, including us, has so many different aspects that you want to bring out. Now, it's very important that you also give an image to a character. So not like directly saying she had blonde hair or she had wavy hair, but when you are describing an event, you can say that the wind was blowing through her baby hair, little by little, or she was passing this short door, and because she was very tall, she had to bend. this is the way that we want to bring an image to a character when we are explaining them. It can be little by little, it can be all in one scene, but it's very important that the reader has something in their mind. And also kind of like their habits, their or like what would they or including you, what would be like the reaction to a steak? Usually people have some type of pattern, and if you think about it, you'll find the pattern, or some type of habitual behavior, or especially if there is a tick, like I usually like do my hair, or some people when they're upset they play with their hair, or I do this, or a lot of men actually start playing with their beard. Think about it. Think about what are those behavioral patterns that you can actually bring and reveal as part of the character development. Thank you. The scenes and dialogues. So when we write a story without a scene or a dialogue, it can become flat. We cannot bring liveness to it unless we bring an image, we bring a dialogue. Now, as far as the scenes, it's about what you remember. In one scene, I remember that, like we are standing, it was like the sun was going down, and my mother had this like skirt that had like these little flower pattern, like it was like a floral pattern on it. So I do based on what I remember, but at the same time, I imagine that in the 80s, what could be the colors that my mother used mostly. So I don't, or, like under the dictatorship, we either wore black or dark gray or navy blue or dark brown. So we weren't even allowed to use other colors. So it makes it a little easier for me to make, if my mother had like a dark brown coat on, then I'm like, I don't remember if it was dark brown, but I know it was a dark color. So based on what you remember, you can bring the scene to life. Or imagine what was the furniture type. Imagine what was, the traffic type. Depends on where you are, what time of your life you're writing about. If it was 50s or 60s, let's say like in America, which would be very different if you're writing about New York. It's a very different scene, the liveliness of New York and all those tall buildings and all those like modern cars, compared to if you're writing about Midwest in America. So it's like the lush nature of the Midwest or the mountains, or depends on that. So you can bring a lot of, you can remember a lot of things. Sometimes people actually go back, if they can, to that place to just feel how it felt and remind themselves, and then they write the scene, if it's possible. And then dialogues, usually short dialogues, because we don't remember unless you have recorded something, or in one way or another, in a journal, or it's a video that you have, or it's a record that you have from the past. But other than that, you just remember the kind of like the core of the dialogue, but you still have to reconstruct it. And don't feel bad about it. It's one part of the rule of memoir writing now. You have to reconstruct that, but make sure that you remember all those major like buzzwords that happened, and usually it's in the key moments that you want to use dialogue or scenes to kind of like, even a lot of time, a climax, or when something is changing. Through the dialogue, you can also develop your characters, the way that they talk, the way that they answer the way that they think, the words that they use, so it's important. And the one important thing is you have to make sure that I personally do that, and I've seen other people do it. We tend to use very, to, all those different adverbs, but make sure that at the end you just click Control F and find all those and delete them. It doesn't add any movement or value to the writing. I have an example here. I want to quickly read it. So I can say Joe was an old cranky man. I'm saying it, I'm telling you, Joe was an old cranky man. But if I want to show you, I would say that late night, coughing hard, it took Joe a few seconds to get up from the old squeaky chair. He puts his hand on his knee, cursing the bad pain. He snapped, "Why don't you put the damn tissue closer to where I sit?" So you get that he's a cranky and old man, right? But you also get that he's also in a lot of pain. So I'm trying to show you here rather than telling. The first sentence is more judgmental, but the second sentence brings more compassion that, oh my God, Joe was actually in a lot of pain and he needed more help. Flashback. So before I go to flashbacks, we have a couple more. Are there any questions, thoughts that you like to share? Anything comes to your mind that you would like to talk about it? Or you can type it. Okay, we can go to the end, and again, I will ask that question, so to make sure that if something came to your mind, we don't leave it unresponse. Flashback and backstory. So the difference between flashback and backstory is the way that we write them is very similar, but flashbacks are kind of like as you are sitting and something is happening in you, you remember it, and it kind of like catapults you to that world. You want to make sure that flashbacks or backstories are not taking the reader away from the story. As you are writing them, all the story writing rules apply to them. It's kind of like we want the sentences to move the story. We don't want dull moments, dull words. But we also don't need kind of like long flashbacks. If you end up with long flashbacks or backstories, you can think twice about it, that do I need to add this as part of the structure of my memoir? And then backstories are kind of like, you can jump to a backstory. You don't have to sit there and remember it. You can jump to it, but it has to be informative. It has to bring some more light to the story, and then also make the reader more curious, that like, oh, now I get this, so let's see what happens next. That's kind of like the rule of the storytelling, right? You want to make sure that you don't keep the reader in dark, but you also keep the reader curious to kind of like want to read the next chapter and the next chapter. So that's basically the difference between flashback and backstories, but also the similarities. You don't want them to be too long. You want them to make sure that they move the story and they add more information and more curiosity to the story. And then reflection. Reflection is basically when we are sharing the lesson learned with the reader as part of our journey. When we, there there are two different dimensions in it. There is a self-reflection as I'm writing this story, and there is the part that I want to share in this story. It's amazing how for the first time that you write your story and then compare it to the 10th edit or version of that exact piece that you wrote for the first time, you not only see the maturity in the literature of your story, you also see the maturity in your own thoughts, because self-reflection brings kind of like a wholeness to your story. You want to be curious, what did I learn from this story? How did it change my life? And how can I communicate that as a human universal? Or, how did the culture impact my life? How did the social events impact my life? When people write about World War II, it's like it's unavoidable that if you lived during that time, it's unavoidable to say, oh no, it didn't impact my life. It did, but in so many different ways. It might have been subtle, or it might have been very direct. So it's important how we see the lessons learned and the impacts of the dynamic of the world around us, how we want to communicate that, convey that as a message. We just have to make sure that we do not want to give any suggestion or advice, because that's not what the reader wants. Allow the reader and trust the reader to get it themselves. We do not want a memoir with suggestion or advice, because it comes across as not a very whole. We want the reader to figure it out based on their own perception. And the conclusion is usually, conclusion is everywhere, as like at the end of each climax and coming down, because your story has like a big climax usually, or a couple of them, or a few of them, but it also has sub-climaxes. And then at the end of this story, when you want to conclude your story, you want to show how you are changed, or the main protagonist, the protagonist changed. Whatever it was related to how the protagonist started, there needs to be a story about how the protagonist is a different person now. You don't want to tell it, you don't want to show it through a scene, give a nice, beautiful image to the reader, but it doesn't have to be kind of like a life happily ever after type of a conclusion. Allow the reader to think about it. But if you bring in a strong image to the end, it usually helps the reader to see the whole chain of the string of the stories that you have brought into one book. And the next one is, okay. So there are definitely fears of writing a memoir. We all have it. Everyone who writes a memoir, less or more, but we all think about them. One is like getting it right. That's what we were talking about, right? We want to make sure that we are fair to ourselves and the characters, and we remember things correctly. We are afraid of feeling overwhelmed, that we will talk about it with the emotional support. Of course, when we are writing about our families, we are afraid of family fallouts, even getting sued or exposures. But these fears don't have to stop us. There is always so many different solutions for each one of them. Especially, like getting sued. That's the easiest part, to talk to a lawyer. Family fallouts. It could be, regardless of you writing or not, it happens, or it could actually bring people together I had so many conversations with my mother that brought us closer when I wrote my memoir. And I remember she was like, oh, you made a monster of me when you were in high school. I didn't say no because her punishments were really brutal. But at the same time, I did tell her that the society back then expected you to punish me to make a good person of me. And also, you were in a bad marriage, you were under a lot of pressure. And not only that, the whole dictatorship, war, and everything happening in Iran, it didn't leave anybody in like a kind of like a relaxed life. Everybody was so far away from their own emotions, yet alone, like talking about their children's emotions. So it could actually bring people closer together. I know that with like for so many things, my mother has forgave herself or me. And in so many things, she never forgave my father because the abuse was too much. So what I'm saying is there is a solution to every one of it. These fears are natural, but don't allow you to stop it. And at the very last minute, you can just say, I'm not going to publish it. It's only for me. So just allow your thoughts to come out on the page. You will see how beautiful it is. And a very important part of it is emotional support. When you are writing your memoir, there are pieces that are easier to write. There are pieces that are emotionally very charged. There are pieces that you don't even want to write. That's how difficult they are. So make sure that you notice that in yourself. Don't blame yourself. Don't overdo it. Don't overwhelm yourself. If you write one piece and you need, like, there were chapters that I needed 3 weeks to even get back to it and look at it. And 3 weeks was my time. It could be a different time for you. Shorter or longer. There are pieces that, like I said, we don't even want to start writing. Maybe we need to talk to someone. Maybe you need to talk like to a therapist or someone safe to kind of like unpack it for yourself and then start writing about it. Make sure you're very careful about the emotions that you feel. They are sometimes subtle, sometimes powerful, but pay attention as you are sitting and writing, as you are thinking about writing. Pay attention to your body sensation, pay attention to how you are feeling, and don't ignore those feelings. And if you felt overwhelmed, please stop writing. Please give yourself time and a self-soothing practice, whatever it can be. I have a few suggestions in the next slide, but your self-soothing practice is yours. Is it a cup of tea, or is it a walk, or is it playing with your pet, or talking to someone you feel like comfortable with? Please make sure you do some self-soothing practices. That's a major part of the healing when we write our memoirs. And also, it's very important if you have a support group. There are a lot of writing groups out there or you can create your own. And at the same time, like I mentioned, if you feel like there are some areas that you cannot even start thinking about it, make sure you talk to a therapist. If you feel like you want to write it, you are writing it, but there are so many self-doubts, there are so many inner judges that are holding you back, you can talk to a coach. But make sure that you take care of yourself. It's very important. I think the next slide, these are just suggestions as far as self-soothing practices to ground yourself, to self-soothe. But you see that the last one is your choice of tool, because this list is never ending. It depends on the person. Someone I just heard that really likes to stand in a stream and feel the running water, and that suits her. Or someone likes to stay under the rain, you know. It's very different for different people. Make sure you find a few for yourself for different types of emotion that come up. And then this is the practice that I wanted to suggest. But before we talk about the practice, are there any questions, any thoughts, comments, things that you want to know more? Oh, yes. Let me type it. Can I type it on my iPad? Let me type it here. Yes, I can. Thank you for asking that. What is a memoir author you admire? There's so many. So David, no. Oh no. David, I forget that I'm on my laptop. No, I'm not on my laptop. David R. Lowy is David R. Lowy is the author of The World is Made Up of Stories. Made of stories, actually. A memoir author that if I don't want to be political, I really enjoy President Obama's memoirs. He has a few. And I also really enjoyed reading Trevor Noah's memoir, Born with Crime, I think. And if you listen to it, he is the narrator. And it's
Born a Crime. That's an excellent one.
Yes, that's amazing. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions?
I have a question about going back to the flashback and the backstory.
Yes, please.
So that's kind of what's difficult to figure out, like, and maybe it just happens in the process of writing, but to figure out like when to do flashback and go to the backstory, or when to just like, it is part of you just write it. So do you just kind of start writing it and then you can figure out how to put it all in there?
I love that question. You know, when you are writing it, when you are writing an event, a story about an event that happened, you kind of like want to go behind the face value, and you want to see why it happened, and was it the cause and effect. So the easiest example that comes to my mind is like if someone killed someone else as a revenge, that flashback is just like a natural part of it to kind of like remember when the murderer was like, you know, abusing, you know. It's kind of like that. Now that's a very exaggerated one that comes to my mind.
Okay.
But it's kind of like what was being cooked behind the scene to get to that point. And then there are certain scenes, there are certain memories that come to your mind that help the reader to see what was the motivation that like for you to do that. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so if you have any question, please feel free to bring it up. But my suggestion is, if you want to create a draft of the narrative that you have in your mind, if not, don't worry about that step. Create a list of milestones like we talked about. Look at the cause and effect, and look which one of those milestones you want to bring out, you want to choose to select, and then look at them a little bit more deeply as far as the cause and effect, and then bring kind of like a little bit more details to each one of those milestones, like the outline. Even if you want to expand the outline to kind of like for your first draft, If you want to do it first person point of view, if you want to do it third person point of view, but just try that. And if you got to that point, you can just like put the stories together, even just a very small piece of your story. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but at least it's a start. I'm so excited that you are here, that you are thinking about writing your story, and I hope this motivates you to start. And that's my 2 cents. Like, please value your life. You do have a story to tell, and it matters. Everybody's story is very important. It matters. And you don't have to be an extraordinary person or a celebrity. I always say our voices as not extraordinary, as ordinary people, is very important, and no one writes about it. So let's just write about our voices, bring our voices out. This is my contact information. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I know Adrian is always kind and sends the slides out. So if you wanted to ask any question or talk about your memoir, please feel free to do it. And if you were thinking about, like, me as a coach can help you, we can definitely talk about that too. But I wish you all the best. And I really hope to see you in our next session and talk about more details of memoir writing. And I hope you got something out of this session. I did. I enjoyed it. It was so much joy for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shabnam. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Hope y'all can make it next week.
And thank you, Adrian, for hosting this workshop. I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure as always.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
All right, take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
I'll send out the slides this evening. Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.